All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you. I know we've got some people still coming in, and as folks are finishing up classes and other obligations, we appreciate you spending this time with us, but we want to go ahead and get started because we've got a very exciting Bridge to Brilliance program planned for you today. First of all, welcome to Bridge to Brilliance. My name is Woodrow Wilson Wagner, and it's my privilege to serve as the Director of Institution Programs here at University of Houston, Victoria. And one of those great institutional programs that I get to manage is our very popular and very exciting Bridge to Brilliance series. It's one of the few things, if not the only thing at UHV, that brings together staff, faculty, students, and community members all under one regular umbrella every month for these seminars. And if you've been to a Bridge to Brilliance seminar before, you know that the conversations have not only been very inspiring and very exciting to participate and listen to, but they've also had a lot of utility and application. That students walk away with new contacts in their lives, that faculty sometimes will partner with our Bridge to Brilliance speakers in their classroom. Staff members will invite Bridge to Brilliance speakers to their events. And of course, community members meet all of those constituencies. And who knows what comes from that, whether it be internships, jobs, or professional mentorship opportunities. So we're very proud of our Bridge to Brilliance series, marking its now third year of existence. And we're so excited to offer this through teams, especially for our students, faculty, and staff in Katy and other places all around Texas and around the world, but also for our students here in Victoria. I think there's a lot of them who are taking our face-to-face classes who are very excited about joining this seminar as well. So I want to get right to it because I think we're going to use every second today in our conversation. And as you read in the bio, our guest speaker is tremendous. His name is Mr. Thomas Gush, and we can all practice saying Gush together, right? Gush, Thomas Gush. And many of you already know of Thomas, especially if you've lived and worked in Victoria in the last 20 or so years. For a big chunk of time, since I think it was 2009 to 2022, Thomas served as the attorney for the city of Victoria. And in that capacity, certainly persuasion and negotiation were very key in making sure Victoria's interests were served. So many things that we enjoy here in Victoria today are due to some of those efforts from Thomas Gush. So as a public servant, we're certainly grateful. But Thomas Gush is also an educator in and of himself. He's a former speech and debate coach. And so for those of you in education and wondering, oh, I wish we had more educators, well, we've got an educator here as well, who I think has a wealth of that experience. Right now, Thomas is in private practice again, and he has a brand new law firm called the Gush Law Firm. And he'll tell us, I'm sure, more about that. And there's going to be some contact information at the end if you want to learn more about that. But I just want to give a shout out right now to our students, specifically the ones that are political science and criminal justice. And you're thinking in your mind, what are some of the things I might do after graduation? Who is somebody I might be able to talk about possible career paths? Well, you're in luck. Thomas Gush is definitely one of those people. If he's not able to answer your question today, then he'll certainly be able to answer your question and follow up. He is all over the state, really all over the nation, doing speaking, presenting at conferences, helping school boards, helping local officials, helping educational institutions. But I don't think he's too busy for anybody on this call. And I will make sure I'll hunt him down and make sure Thomas Gush is going to return your call or return your email. Now, Some of you already know this, but I'm just going to get it out of the way for full disclosure purposes. Yes, as many of you know, Thomas and I are related. We are first cousins. I've shared this with Thomas before, but I'll share it with all of you. Part of this Bridge to Brilliance series is identifying mentors and professional people we can look to in our lives to give us inspiration. Well, when I was a young boy, I had a mentor in my life who was my first cousin who gave me a lot of inspiration. He may not have realized it. We lived in different cities, but we spent a lot of time together at family gatherings. And our parents were siblings and they were very, very close. So I never had a brother. I had three sisters. Thomas also had three sisters, but he had a brother. And I always looked up to Thomas as kind of my surrogate big brother, as an academic, as a professional, and just as a great human being. So it means a lot for me to finally bring him to Bridge to Brilliance. Mr. Thomas Gwosdz, welcome. I'm just going to give our folks a few little housekeeping things. If you have questions, please type those in the chat, but you can also ask your questions at the end if you want to turn on your microphone. If you want to turn on your camera, you can do that, but you can certainly type them in the chat and I'll try to be monitoring those. And like I said, there might be other follow-up questions you have for Thomas, and he can then certainly answer those. But Mr. Thomas Gwosdz, with all that said, welcome to Bridge to Brilliance, and welcome virtually to the University of Houston, Victoria. We are so glad to have you. Welcome, sir.
I'm so glad to be here, and I just hope after hearing that introduction that I can find a way to live up to it. Wow.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Thomas, we're going to get right to it. And you and I have spoke about these topics before. You've taught these topics, you've lived these topics, you've seen these topics unfold in things like city councils and legislatures and in businesses. But I want to get right to it about when we talk about persuasion and we talk about negotiation, how would you first define these concepts? Let's just start with that question.
I think that persuasion and negotiation are really two sides of the same coin. Persuasion, the classical definition would be the art of trying to convince you of something, to change your mind in some way. And I think rarely in our lives do we encounter persuasion as a purely academic concept. When you and I are teaching, of course, we control the narrative, and it's easy for us to set up a persuasive speech or a persuasive monologue to try to convince our students' minds. And in fact, I think all good teachers are doing that. They're not just sharing information. They're trying to persuade their class that they should agree with this information, that this is the right way to perceive something. And that's what I think persuasion is. Negotiation is when the person on the other side gets to talk back with you, because naturally they want to share their own view, and that view might itself carry with it some desire to change my mind about what I'm thinking. And although I think sometimes we think about negotiation as a formal concept, like when I'm in my law practice negotiating a contract with another party, yes, we might be sitting on opposite sides of the table, and we might have very different goals in mind for this negotiation. But really, it's just a two-sided persuasive conversation to me.
You're on
You
mute.
might have, there you are. Okay, I lost your audio there for just a second.
Okay, sorry. We've got a whole host of folks on this call. We've got a lot of students, but we also have faculty, we have staff, we have members of the community. I can see that there's a few elected officials that you've probably interfaced with before that are also here. So when you think about all of those constituencies, I want to get into this about obstacles to persuasion and negotiation, and how each of those constituencies can overcome them. And I want to start with our students, right? because our students are looking at this right now. They're saying, oh, Thomas Gush, yeah, that sounds great, sounds wonderful. But what are some of the obstacles that I have that then using persuasion, using negotiation can help me transcend those things? So when you think about students, and you taught students, you were a student, you're around students, you have children who are students, you get that. And so let's start with the obstacles that students are facing and then how they might overcome some of those obstacles.
This is a great question, Woodrow, and I'm glad that you asked it. I actually presented to a statewide conference a year ago on exactly this topic of how can we get past the polarized communication that our society has fallen into. Obviously, when we look at national politics and try to bring that down to the local level, it's very difficult to get past that. And I'd like to talk about that aspect of it as well. But before we do that, you asked specifically about students, and I'm glad that you did. Because when I was a student, I didn't have the confidence that is necessary to have this kind of conversation with you. I think I've told you before, this doesn't come naturally to me. This one-on-one conversation, I would much rather be at the front of the room behind a podium where I control the narrative. I'm not naturally gifted at small talk, at networking events. Those things are my kryptonite. And I wanted to share with your students the thing that got me over the hump to be able to do this professionally, especially in small settings. And it's this book. This is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I believe this is the single greatest book at helping people learn the skills that go into doing what we're doing right now. This communication, this sharing of ideas. Dale Carnegie was an instructor back in the 1930s at a YMCA, and he had young men, young professionals coming to him asking for advice about how to get ahead in their business. And what he told them was what we now call soft skills, the communication and the ability to interact with people are what are going to get you ahead in life. And he started teaching them how to do it. And local publisher happened to stop by the YMCA, this was in New York, and told him, you need to write that down and create a book out of this. And so he did, and it became this, which is the latest version of How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think it's widely considered to be the first self-help corporate self-improvement book, and it is probably the best selling because it is still considered to be one of the best. For me personally, the skills that are taught in that book, things like smile, things like learning and remembering people's names, referring to people by their names when you have a chance to do that. It goes a long way. And I know it's hard to remember the names of people that you just meet in social circles, but it really does have an impact. And I think the biggest tip that he gives in this book that I took to heart was to be interested, not interesting. My natural reaction is to try to be the interesting person and control the conversation. What do I have to say? And his response to that is, you don't have to say anything. You need to ask. You need to be interested in what the other person is saying. And that's what's going to make you memorable and develop those relationships that are going to help with persuasion and negotiation. Can I go back to the other question that you asked, though, about the obstacles in our society? I said I talked about that at a convention last year. And the core of my message was that facts don't change people's minds, relationships do. Are you familiar with the Stanford psychological experiences on perseverance from the 1970s? There was a great experiment done at Stanford. It's been repeated by others since hundreds of times, apparently with all the same results. What they did is they told a bunch of participants to take a test. And at the end of the test, they told half of them, you're really good at this. Would you move on to the second phase of our study so we can figure out how you were so good at this? The second group, the other half of the participants, they said, wow, you're not very good at this. Would you mind moving on to the second phase of our study so we can figure out why you're no good at this? In the second phase of the study, all participants were told the same thing. We lied to you. We don't know the answers to the question. We don't know if you're any good at all. But still, we'd like to know, do you think you're any good at this? And what they found was that the people they told that were really good thought they were really good, even though they had been told, we don't know if you're any good at all. We actually lied to you. That belief that was planted persevered despite facts to the contrary, right? And that's why I like to say facts don't change people's minds. Relationships do. If you want to convince somebody that what they are saying is wrong, it does no good whatsoever to give them the facts about why they're wrong. Instead, build a relationship with that person. And your ability to convince them to see things your way is going to be much stronger when they have a personal relationship with you to build that onto.
That's such a great thing. Okay. Because as academics, and you're a teacher yourself, on the one hand, we want to tell our students facts matter, evidence matters, truth matters, all of that. And I think that still is the case, but you have to couple that with, well, if you're going to reach somebody where they're at, they might not be at a place where showing them all the evidence in the world is going to convince them. Now, we can do one of two things, Thomas. We can call those people stupid, and that they just need to be not stupid, or we can shift our persuasive tactic. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's sometimes easier to print off a bunch of facts and figures and charts and graphs than it is to forge an actual relationship with somebody. And I, like you, am kind of socially awkward. And it's like hard. And it's like, oh, hi, so and so, we had our Thanksgiving feast here today, and it was for faculty and staff. And it's like all these people were in the room, and I just, I love them all. They're wonderful, but I get this social anxiety a little bit.
I get the same social anxiety, and so it must be genetic.
It is.
But I promise you, I've had other people tell me they didn't know that about me.
Right.
And so I think it is possible to overcome that anxiety and actually move into something that is at least productive, that at least you can carry on those conversations. Now, once the conversation is over and the meeting's done, you may need to go home and, sit in a quiet room for a little while and recover. Some days I feel like I need to do that.
And I'm so glad you're saying that out loud. Our students need to hear that, right? That some of this is performative. Some of this is outside our comfort zone. I've got speech students who are on this very call saying, Mr. Wagner, I'm so nervous. How do I get over my nervousness? How do I get over my nervousness? And the first thing I say is like, I don't know if you ever get over it. And they're like, what? Because they're expecting me to give them the secret of like, this is the secret to get over nervousness. And I kind of tell them is like, I'm nervous every time I come to this class. And right. I stand before all of you. They're like, you're nervous. You get all that. And I'm like, yes, I'm nervous.
Right.
But
fear of public speaking, you know this, right? The fear of public speaking is what,
absolutely.
The second most common?
And the most common is death, right? So it's death, public speaking. So a part of it, Thomas, is fake it to make it. Part of it is performative. And that it's okay to say, you know what, after I did my thing, I need to go to my quiet place and recharge. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing bad about that. In fact, that's my secret to life. That's how I'm getting through all of these things. And I think our students need to see an accomplished professional like yourself and understand that that's the reality. The Thomas Gwosdz that they see on TV, they read about in the newspaper, that they hear about winning national awards or what. I mean, this is the guy who is saying that I've got to take that time to recharge. But that doesn't mean you can't do the relationships.
Right. Now, there certainly are people who come by it naturally, who are naturally gregarious, right? Those people, in my field, they'll wind up being politicians.
Right.
Okay. A lot of the politicians that I know either are much better than I am at faking it, or they really do enjoy those situations. And I think some people do enjoy those situations. And if you do, embrace it. Okay. Learn how to use that professionally, because, if Dale Carnegie is right, and that's going to get you ahead in your career, then you've already got a leg up on people like me.
So now speak to our faculty and staff specifically. We have some staff on this call who negotiation is a part of their job description, whether they're negotiating with vendors, whether they're negotiating with outside folks, people in their own departments. They're doing negotiation every day as part of their lives. And then we've got faculty on this call who are desperately trying to negotiate with their students or trying to persuade their students that the message that they have is valuable. So speak to those two constituencies for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the deeper you get into the world of business and profession, the facts do matter. But they matter in the sense that in a business conversation, I'm going to have to put together a spreadsheet that shows mathematically that this business proposition is likely to make money, that it's worth taking the risk, right? The facts themselves aren't necessarily going to persuade somebody, but what they are going to do is they're going to lend me the credibility to help bridge across that gap. Credibility, I think, is one of the most important ways to begin persuading someone. If you and I are standing at the front of the classroom and we have doctor or professor or lawyer in our title, we have some inherent credibility when people just walk in the room. That's not always the case in business. When you're sitting across the table from someone, they may have more credibility than you do just because they've done this kind of deal more often, or because they have more financial resources to do this deal, or whatever it may be. It's important that you do bring with you the facts. And when I say facts don't change people's minds, I'm certainly not saying to ignore the facts at all. In professional life, you need to have the credibility to convince people of something.
And it's not mutually exclusive. And I think this is where people's brains kind of start to explode. They're like, wait a second, either we respect the facts or we don't. Well, I think we still respect the facts. We still respect evidence. We still respect truth. But we have to couple that with something else, especially if we're finding that that is not persuading someone, especially if we're finding that that's not working. Again, when something's not working, we can be like, well, it's not working. Guess I can't do it, right? Well, that's not a good answer to tell a boss or a supervisor, right? I mean,
Right.
You want to be able to go back and say, I did this or I did that and accomplish something, not just these people are not persuadable. Their minds can't be changed. I mean, that's where the relationship comes in, and it's harder. That's the harder lift, is to say, okay, let's suppose this person that I think is totally opposite than me, what might we barely have in common? Okay, we breathe oxygen. Okay, so you start making a list, trying to see where those commonalities might be and where there's avenues for relationship. But see, Thomas, as human beings, my sense is that that's hard. That takes time. That takes effort. Thus, most people don't do it. Thus, most people don't follow the Carnegie model, right? So
Yes.
speak to that a little bit. Yeah.
Alain de Botton wrote the book Religion for Atheists.
Mm.
And in his book, he talks about the fastest way to change an opponent's mind is to invite them to supper, right? It's interesting the way you said, you think about the things that we have in common. Well, what we have in common is a deep-seated social fabric. And if we take advantage of that, I mean, cups of coffee, trips to breakfast, lunch off campus, the things that you can do to get away from whatever the issue is that we're talking about right now. What is the issue that I'm trying to persuade you on? If I can move away from that and have an opportunity to connect with you on a personal level, it goes a long way. Now, obviously, in business, in school, you don't always have the opportunity to develop the relationships. That's much more playing the long game, right? And when you don't have that avenue available to you, hey, strategy is about picking the avenue that's going to succeed right now. And there's all sorts of resources out there about how to do salesmanship and what the sales techniques are, and certainly leverage those when you need to. Whether that be the appeal to credibility, whether that be making something scarce, whatever those sales techniques are, they can come in handy in this process as well.
Okay, so this is what I want to do now. I want you to think of a specific example in your professional life, and especially when you were kind of on a mission, maybe someone sent you, maybe you sent yourself, to persuade the non-persuadable. No one else could persuade him. No one else could move the needle. But you're like, I'm Thomas freaking Gush. I can go in. Look at me. I'm city attorney. And so talk about one of those, and I'm sure there are many, these mission impossibles that you went in, and many people couldn't do it. They couldn't persuade, they couldn't negotiate, they couldn't deal with these other entity or organization or person because they were so different. But given all the little tools that you said and you used, you were able to transcend some of that. Would you mind just sharing with us a story in those regards?
You know, because of my career as a lawyer, there's so many of those stories that I simply cannot tell. Attorney-client privilege is going to get in the way here. And so I can't really dive into some of the specific negotiations that I was involved with. But I'll tell you one story about something that happened to me professionally that I struggled to accomplish for years. And that was just a restaffing and a reorganization of our own department when I was city attorney for the city of Victoria. And there were four of us in the department, and two of us were lawyers. And I really felt that we were understaffed on the lawyer side of that equation. One of my very good friends got promoted out of our department and went on to do better things. And that created a vacancy where I could backfill with another lawyer if I could convince people to do it. I had been trying to convince the administration and the city council for years to add that additional staff person. But I was able to take advantage of that situation to think outside the box. Instead of simply adding, I was actually presented with an opportunity to subtract and add simultaneously and still wound up at a net zero. I was able to leverage some of those relationships that I had built over the years. You know, maybe it just took 5 years to get this process done because the first time I tried it, they didn't know me well enough. I didn't have those relationships built. But also, I did lean very heavily into the data and the facts. I am a data junkie. I like my spreadsheets. And I am more than happy to lay out a bunch of information on a spreadsheet and try to organize it in a way that people can see the advantages of different alternatives. And then they can evaluate for themselves. And it's not me telling them what to do. It's me presenting the information in a way that allows them to reach their own conclusion. And I was very lucky finally to convince city council that this reorganization was going to be a positive for all of the departments of the city government. And we were able to restructure the department, hired a great young lawyer to come join us at the city law office, and, you know, never looked back.
That's so excellent. Okay, we're getting some questions in the chat, which kind of intersect with some of the questions on my list too, because we've got people now, you and I, it's hard for us to think, Thomas, but we're getting older, right? We have to like take a moment. Now it's easier for you because you have children, so you can kind of see life through their eyes. I have no children to do that with. But let's, Thomas, just go in the Wayback Machine for a moment. When we were just kind of trying to get things figured out, when we were getting things started. And I'm going to go with this great question from Kendall. Someone's just starting their career. What advice would you offer on mastering the art of persuasion and negotiation in the professional world? Are there specific skills, approaches, or lessons from your own experiences that you believe were particularly valuable? And the key word is there were. You have to go in the way back, not Thomas Gush 2023, but we're talking about Thomas Gush 2003, Thomas Gush 1993, before some of these young, lovely people were born, right? When we ourselves we're starting all of our journeys before we had all of our degrees and all of our suits and all of our ties and all of our degrees on the wall, right? Let's put ourselves in that population for a moment. So you're just getting started. Talk about that a little bit.
You're asking me to put my warts on public display. Okay.
Yes, yes. It'll
Okay,
be
that's
fun. It'll be
fine.
very therapeutic. We'll all enjoy. Go ahead.
So I can tell you a great story. It was a learning experience for me long after the fact. At the time, it was simply very frustrating, and I didn't know that it was going to be a lesson for me. And it took a long time to digest that lesson before it finally turned into something meaningful. I had a job while I was still in college, and I was working in a professional environment, in an office environment. And I had probably worked there about 2 months worth. My boss was stepping down and they were going to hire a replacement for her. And in the meantime, hey, you've been there a couple of months, you can keep the processes going. You can do it, right? When the new boss got hired, the instruction changed. Teach your new boss how to do the job. Teach her how to do her job. That was incredibly difficult, and I failed miserably at that because I took the approach of, I know what needs to be done here, and I know it better than you do. And obviously I did know it better. I knew it at least 2 or 3 months better than she did, right? Which was not very much, but I did not respect the formal structure of the organization. She was hired to be my boss. And there is a lot of delicacy that goes into teaching up. When you teach someone who is your superior, you have to be incredibly deferential in how you persuade and how you go about presenting that information. I was young, I was arrogant. I made a point of saying, hey, you need to do it this way. And she looked at me and said, I'm the boss here. I don't need to do it any way you want me to.
Right. Excellent.
And we actually, the two of us, got summoned down the hall to her boss's office, 2 layers up in the organization from me. And I was given the royal talking to. You are not in charge. She is your boss. Even if you don't think she knows what she's doing yet, she gets to make the decision about how to do it. And I thought, this is incredibly unjust because just weeks ago, you were telling me to teach her how to do this, and now you're telling me that my lessons are not valuable to her. And it was just immaturity on my own part to fail to recognize that the organizational structure meant something. And it wasn't just what I wanted to accomplish. This was intended to be a team with a leader, and I wasn't the leader. And my actions were not a teammate's actions either.
See, I think our students can really relate to that because there's so many unjust things that happen in a workplace, in their workplace, whether they're working part-time or full-time. And I am in the classroom trying to give them this just moral compass about how to communicate and how to deal with folks. They leave Professor Wagner's class and then they go to the injustice of the unjust world, right? And they're
Yes.
trying to do that. And then they'll come back to me like, but Professor Wagner, it didn't work that way because XYZ. So part of this is adaptability. Part of this is in the real world, things are not always going to be just. Now, I'm not saying we just tolerate every injustice and just, make everything just normalize dysfunctionality, but we have to realize that when we are at the bottom, we have to start from somewhere. I think part of this is another question I wrote about social media. Has social media, Thomas, conditioned especially young people to make them think that they're on the same level as their boss? There are no echelons. There are no subordinate superiors. There's something about the social media that I think has accelerated people's own sense of worth and their credentials when they don't really have them. And obviously there's a lot of people who are on this call that grew up when you and I did, when there was no stuff like that.
Yeah.
Has that just been like this accelerant to puffing people up to the point where they have all these expectations, like, well, what do you mean my idea wasn't the greatest? A lot of people liked it on Facebook, right?
Yes.
And they're somehow shocked that their persuasiveness that worked on social media is not producing the same fruits in real life. Just talk about that a second.
If I can be blunt with your younger audience today, they need to know that we're talking about them a lot. We in our generation who are in leadership positions in professional organizations, businesses, we are spending a lot of time thinking and talking about how to deal with exactly the phenomenon you described. It's not the millennial generation. The millennials are all in their 30s now, right? I don't even know what the generation is called now, but it's a definite difference in the way that we think about social structures. I was raised, you were raised with a boss who was always right. And you went to work and you did what your boss told you to do. And newer workers are coming in now, and they don't have that same social structure because of the equality on the internet that you just described. It's an absolute thing. And I don't mean that as a criticism either. I think that the creativity, the independence, and the willingness to speak up about things that this younger generation brings into the workplace is refreshing. It is challenging for sure. But I think the organizations that adapt and learn how to work with those people and to harness that energy and those ideas, those are the organizations that are going to leap to the front. And organizations that continue to insist on that organizational structure, that rigid structure, are going to get left behind. What I would encourage your young audience members to do and to think about is identifying the structure that they wind up in. Rather than banging their head against the wall because my boss doesn't get it, maybe they need to do some analysis about what is the organizational structure here and what does my boss expect from us? Because I can promise you there are organizations out there within single sectors of industry where some organizations get it and others don't. And, if you're not able or willing to work within the structure of a formal, old-fashioned, if I can use that word, business model, there are other opportunities out there. That's not great for people like you and me, right, who grow up in the formal structure, because that's going to lead us to say, in addition to get off my lawn, we're going to say those youngsters, they just don't want to work.
Right.
Because comments like that come from a position of a social structure that is dying. That social structure doesn't exist among younger workers. And if I continue to expect to have that social structure in my workplace, it's going to cause problems for my organization in recruiting talent and getting that talent to work productively. Because if I tell them, sit down at your desk, you're not allowed to have an idea because you haven't been here 20 years, they're not going to work for me. They're going to go somewhere else. And so if I don't adapt, they're going to move on.
That's excellent. Do you think people are doing that? Do you think they are adapting? Or do you think they're like, yeah, I hear you, Thomas Gush, but I'm still the boss, right? I mean, they're going to have to adapt if they want to survive, though, right? I mean, the business model won't make profit if they don't adapt.
When I said at the beginning that we're talking about those younger workers all the time, I think that there is a huge school of thought that's probably being discussed in y'all's business school, probably being taught in your business school about this change and how it is happening. And I think that business leaders who are paying attention are seeing that and that they understand that they're going to need to change and that there is going to need to be a new social structure established. But I do think also there are a lot of business owners who either don't want to or aren't paying attention or just aren't ready to accept that things are changing. You know what I think has been the best thing for this social change? COVID.
Mm,
COVID has forced a lot of businesses to reconcile the notion that their employee doesn't need to be sitting at a desk in their building.
mm,
Employees often don't want to sit in a desk in a building. They want to be working from home, working from a Starbucks coffee shop. Just Tuesday evening, I was in another community sitting in a Barnes and Noble waiting for a meeting that was going to begin with a client. And sitting in the coffee shop, the Starbucks that was in the Barnes and Noble, there were probably a half dozen business professionals working in the bookstore. And I thought, wow, this is a great option. Wouldn't it be great if I could just go to the bookstore and work in the afternoon when I want to get out of the office? And the answer is you can, unless you're working in one of those structures that hasn't yet adapted to it. And COVID made us all reevaluate that.
all right, we got questions coming in. This is
Yeah.
a really good one from Eric. What did you do to practice small talk in business or improve your charisma between peers and bosses? So what did you do to practice that in business and improve your charisma between peers and bosses?
Okay, I'm going to go. I love practical stuff. Okay, so this is a great question. This is, remember the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book is broken down into specific skills that make up a skill set, right? By the way, this is a bit of an aside, and I'll circle back to the practical in just a second. But can we stop using the phrase soft skills, right? Soft skills seems to imply that these skills are not necessary or that they're not core, they're not essential to what we're doing. Man, if you can't convince someone that your idea is a good one because you don't have the soft skills, the communication skills to get that idea across, you are ineffective. It doesn't matter how much you know about your subject matter, all right? So let's stop calling them soft skills. These skills are critical to getting ahead in business and in life. Okay, so back to the practical. The book is divided up into single skills. There is a chapter on why you should smile and how you should smile. When I read this book the first time, I literally read it a chapter a week. I would read a chapter about why you should smile and how you should smile in your interactions. And then when I went to Walgreens drugstore, I made a practice of smiling when I went through the cash register. Nobody wants to smile at the cash register at a Walgreens, right? It was a conscious effort to practice that skill. The next week, I read another chapter, and the next chapter might be about learning people's names. So when I went to Walgreens, man, everybody wears a name tag. Hi, Mary, how are you doing today? Smile at her, right? And it's a cumulative effect of picking up these skills and practicing them. You have to put yourself in situations where you can practice. You can't practice a handshake over a Teams call. You just can't do that. Okay. So if you want to practice your handshake, get out there to Walgreens and go shake someone's hand.
Are you working for Walgreens? You get some discounts. Yeah,
Don't I wish?
Walgreens. That
Yes,
was
this
very
this
specific,
segment
Thomas.
was sponsored by
This
Walgreens.
yeah, sponsored by Walgreens. Okay, excellent. Another good one coming from Becky. Do you think that structure comes from childhood, such as everyone gets a trophy and things like that compared to earlier years when growing up? So this kind of generational shift that perhaps we see now, I think that's what Becky's kind of getting to.
Yeah. Um, as an educator, a trained educator, and I have lifetime certification in teaching in secondary education, English and speech communication. So when I say as an educator, I'm referring back to the things that we learned in college about psychological development, youth development, and why certain things are important. People in my generation often will criticize the younger generation as, oh, they got the blue ribbon for participation every time. They never had to earn it. And that those things are negative in some way. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly, completely. I think that there is an appropriate developmental stage for competition where only one person gets to win. But I don't think that that stage actually happens until teenage or later. You know, for some people, it takes a lot longer to develop the confidence to tolerate not being the winner. And the way you build that confidence in a young person is you give them those rewards. Maybe it was a real struggle for them to participate. Maybe it was a struggle for them to raise their hand in class. Giving them the award to build their confidence is, I think, a critical step in the process of growing towards that competitive nature. Do I think that some organizations and some schools went too far on that front? Yes, for sure. But it is clearly, in my mind, a necessary step to build people up and give them the confidence, you know, as one of my friends likes to say, to go out there and slay dragons. Nobody's going to put on that armor if they don't have the confidence that they're going to come back alive. Okay. So you've got to somehow develop that in people. And when they are ready to move into the more competitive, more cutthroat world, they'll take that step on their own.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a number of international students, as you know, Thomas, here at UHV. One of them is a brilliant student that I have called Gizo, and he's from South Africa. And he says he's from South Africa, and one thing about business in South Africa is they hardly hire graduates because they don't have the experience. Do you think that's a valid enough reason not to hire a graduate?
That is a great question. I have 5 kids of my own, okay? And most of my kids spent at least some time in college, if not fully graduated, okay? And they are all at the age that you probably are, where they are entering the workforce and getting their feet wet. And I can tell you, it's incredibly difficult, even here in America these days, for young people to get started in a career-oriented job. How do you ever cross that threshold from all that I have is a piece of paper on the wall behind me that says I studied something to actually moving into that? And I think that in our American culture, we do a pretty good job of valuing post-secondary education, and putting some stock in that piece of paper that says that I spent some time studying. And I think a lot of professional organizations look at that and say, the 4 years you spent studying is equivalent to having spent 4 years gaining that experience on the job. It's certainly not true everywhere. And if you start and stop a college career and don't cross the finish line, I don't think you get nearly enough credit for the learning that you did along the way without getting the diploma. In cultures where that recognition might not exist, obviously I have never been to South Africa. I don't understand the culture there, so I don't mean to assume what it's like. But I can see how it would be difficult to cross that threshold. Depending on what industry he's planning on going into, I think there's a lot of opportunity to just show them that you know it. I have a very good friend, high school best friend, who went off to college and failed, dropped out of college, but he had computer skills back in the early 90s. And he would walk into a business and just say, let me show you what I can do. I don't have the certificate, but let me show you what I can do. Some industries today, like the computer tech field, those certificates matter an awful lot, and it's hard to get in the door, even with those kinds of skills. But I would encourage people to try to demonstrate their skills through a portfolio or through some other method that they can show a potential employer that they really do have the skills, even if they didn't generate those skills through professional experience.
That's such a great point, because we've been talking about this in our speech class. One of the assignments is doing a speech. They're trying to convince a company to hypothetically hire them. And some of these are incoming freshmen. They're 17, 18, 19 years old. They don't have. So one of the things we're talking about is, what about class projects? What about all this stuff that you've done? Try to get all that stuff in like a portfolio. That
Oh
might
man,
just as be just as good as having all of those experiences.
can I give you 2 examples? When I see the Southwest Texas diploma hanging on the wall behind you, I also went to Southwest Texas back
And
before it
it's
was called
Southwest
Texas
Texas,
State.
Thomas. It's none of this Texas State stuff, right? It's the
I,
real Southwest Texas, right?
I'm with you. And in my education classes, I had a professor that made us create a binder. Mine was an inch and a half thick, spiral bound portfolio of all of the quizzes that we had written just as class assignments, all the lesson plans we had done just as class assignments. And we had to create this binder as a class grade. And when I went to my first interview to become a school teacher, I had it in my briefcase with me. Okay. I mean, I was young and I didn't know what I needed to take with me to the interview. So I took it with me.
You had a
And in the,
briefcase. That's really cool. I mean, come on. You had a
I've
briefcase.
always been a nerd. You know that.
I know that.
Okay. And so halfway through the interview, the superintendent asked me a question about lesson planning. And I thought, what a great opportunity. And I literally reached into my briefcase and grabbed this portfolio that I had prepared only because a professor had made me do it. And I flipped it open to the third tab and I went, see, here's the lesson plans that we prepared at university. I know how to do this stuff. So that's story number one. All right. Story number two is my son. I have a son who's 22. His name is Cullen. And he went off to A&M thinking he was going to be a biology major and eventually become a doctor. And that didn't work out for him. But he has always been very talented as an artist. And through the course of his college career, he was doing pieces of art for people. Friends would see his doodles and say, wow, I wish you could do something like that for me. I want an avatar for my chat program, our Discord server. And he would create those pieces of art for them just as a hobby on the side. And when I saw the things he had done, I said, you need to put these together in a portfolio. You need to pull these items together. In fact, I know you put my corporate logo up on the screen early on in this process. He designed that for me. Part of the reason I hired him to do that was so that he could add it to his portfolio. He went to his first job interview after leaving college here in town with a design firm, and he pulled out his resume was just a full color glossy of different pieces he had designed with notes about who had bought it and what it was being used for in the commercial market. And that was what he presented. They hired him on the spot. Okay.
Wow.
So that proof of concept, that showing you've got the skills, there's still ways to do that today. And I really love what you're doing, talking about portfolios.
All right, we're getting close to the end, but I want to make sure we get this last question in. This, Thomas, is from one of the many pre-law students we have. I know we have at least 2 or 3 pre-law students who are on this call. This comes from Benjamin Perry. And Ben, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
How about now? You hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
A question for you, Mr. Thomas. I'd like to ask, what are some of the qualities and the qualifications that you look for as an employee in your career field?
As an employee, you mean as an employer, what do I
I'm
look
sorry.
for in a potential employee?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hard work. The willingness to dive in and figure something out, because I almost don't care how smart you are. All right. If you are diligent, you're going to get to the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
And that is more important to me than somebody who can make a snap judgment and get the answer right away. Ancient Chinese proverb, my favorite, is perseverance furthers. The more you work towards that goal line, you're eventually going to get there. So I highly respect people who are hard workers and that are striving to get across the finish line, even if they're not the first person to get there.
All right, excellent. And I'm sure Ben will be one of the many students, Thomas, who will want to follow up with you. I know I see Joel also. We've got some really great aspiring attorneys. And it would just be nice to pick your brain and just like, what's my next step? What do I do? I'm getting ready to take the LSAT or whatever. And I think they would just really appreciate a cup of coffee with you. That would be so fantastic. Thomas,
Absolutely. Have them reach out to you and you can put them in contact with me. I'd love to sit down with people and talk about law school in general. And man, it was one of the most fun times of my life. The intellectual challenge of law school is just cannot be duplicated anywhere.
so Thomas, we've reached the end, and this is my favorite part of Bridge to Brilliance. We call it This Is Your Life. And I've got some special things. I was really excited about this episode of This Is Your Life because I had all kind of things in the personal Wagner Gush archives. So first of all, just if you can just, that's you, of course, as city attorney. Many people have seen you in the newspaper and that's your fine office. I just want to know, how often did you use all these books, Thomas? Were they really used, or were they just for show, or did you use those books on a regular basis?
Aren't those really pretty?
They are. They're very pretty. They're very pretty. They make you
That's
look
the
very
answer right
smart.
there. They're really pretty books.
Yeah.
I went to law school long enough ago that we actually were taught to use those books. There is a system, a reference system, just like there is in any library, to track down information in those books. And I could probably still do it if I had to today, but everything's online now. Everything is so much easier. Now, we pay a lot of money for subscription services that have all of that information at our fingertips. But just like everything else, technology has changed the world.
It does make you look smart. What are we looking at here? Who are these humans? It looks like some city council folk. Is this your
Yeah.
last day as city attorney?
Not quite. It was close to the end. That is Mayor Jeff Balknight, who I'm sure you all saw in the news, just recently announced he's going to run for state government. And so it's fitting that in that picture, the center chair at the dais is empty because it's soon to be empty. And I hope everyone will pay attention to our local politics and as we go through the process of trying to choose a new mayor.
Is there an announcement you'd like to make today on Bridge to Brilliance, Thomas?
No, Woodrow, you know that I am not a politician, and I do not ever intend to be. I enjoy being city attorney. I tell people all the time, it gives me a seat on the front row of the 50-yard line. I got a great view of the game, but I am not in the game.
I love that. Excellent. Okay, this is you with your successor. Many people might recognize Mrs. Allison Lacey, who is the new city attorney, who you got to work with quite a bit and felt really good about handing off that baton to.
I did. I respect Allison tremendously. She's a great attorney. She came to me about 5 or 6 years before I decided to retire and steadily worked her way up, expanded her knowledge. She did not have a knowledge base in local government law when she started there. She had been a prosecutor. She had been a corporate attorney. She had been a criminal defense attorney, but she had never done the kind of work that I do, which is very complicated. And she stuck to it and became a really, really good attorney in her own right. I was very comfortable walking away and telling the city council, here's the person you should hire. And they listened. They hired her, and she's doing a great job.
So here's Thomas making that face, which I'm sure he's made a lot. This is the 5th or 6th time somebody tries to mispronounce his name, and it is Gush. And again, we're spoiled. We've said it all of our lives. We know it's hard. There are just, what I tell people, there are letters you don't pronounce, right? There are just extra letters. But poor Thomas, how many times did he have to listen to the mispronunciations? Here's a thoughtful Thomas doing some consulting or presenting at a conference. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah, that was at a recent conference of superintendents. This picture at the same conference, I was actually teaching some local superintendents about the employment process and things that they should look for in deciding whether or not to keep an employee on or whether it was time to make a hard decision.
And did they pronounce your name correctly?
You know what I tell people? Don't look at it.
Don't look at it. Don't even look at it.
Just don't look at it. It's easy to say.
Who is this young bloke?
Oh my goodness, you really did go in the Wayback Time Machine. This young man was serving mass at, I don't recognize which church that is. I probably recognize that cross as being the cross from Holy Family, though. Am I right?
I don't know, but you look very holy and very professional here. And who are these blokes? Now, this is one of my favorite because somebody is wearing this Packer shirt who's obviously the older cousin, and somebody else is being like tied with ties or something. I mean, where were our parents? This is
Yeah,
terrible.
no kidding. Was that
By
you
the way,
getting
this
tied
is
up there?
me, everyone. This is Woodrow Wilson Wagner. This is my little sister. This is Thomas's brother. This is one of our cousins. And I don't know what kind of sadistic, horrible thing you're doing, but seriously, where are our parents?
Where are our parents, and whose house is that even at?
That is
I
our
recognize
house.
a few more people in that picture, but other than that, yeah, that goes way back. I probably would have been 10 years old in that picture.
I don't know, but you were having fun torturing your little cousins, that's for sure.
Absolutely,
Who
still
who
do.
is who is this woman and why is she significant to our lives?
This is our grandmother. My father and your mother were both her children. She was a formidable woman. I did not realize until significantly later in our lives that I was afraid of that woman as a child because she was very strict. She was very certain about what she wanted to have happen in and around her. And I can remember the moment when she was in the hospital, very frail, shortly before she passed away, when it crossed my mind that this is just another human being. And I've been afraid of this woman my whole life. Afraid is too strong of a word. I love and respect this woman tremendously. But Bridget Snoga Gush, tremendous, strong-willed woman.
Speaking of strong-willed humans, who are these two humans?
This would be my father, Clarence, your uncle, and my mother, Gertrude. That picture was probably taken in Grandma's house. Man, judging by their age, I would say, and by the plaid shirt, I would say mid 70s.
Do you still have that shirt? We need to dig up that shirt. That's a
We
good
need to
look.
dig up that shirt someplace. My dad wore plaid shirts all of the time, plaid shirts and blue jeans, right up until the moment he decided to take up water skiing again in his 50s. He had the whitest legs you've ever seen.
Right. And this is one I'm very proud of. I've kept for a long time. You've probably never even seen this. This is your mother
It
and
is.
me, and I desperately need a haircut. Maybe your mother gave me a haircut shortly thereafter.
No,
Not
that was
sure.
also in the 70s. Yeah.
That was probably in the 70s. Thomas, tell me where this is and why this is a significant place on planet Earth for you.
This is my happy place. I took that picture in probably 2015 or 16. My daughter and I had gone out to our getaway. We call it the Creek House. And we were just going to have a campfire that evening. And as the sun went down, it just got more and more and more beautiful. You can see the reflection off the water. And it's perhaps one of the prettiest sunsets I've ever seen. And I was lucky enough to capture that on an iPhone.
So Thomas Gush, you have written a book,
I
and
have.
it is a fantastic book. It is available on Amazon.
It will be. It has not yet been put, actually released on Amazon. It's been sent to them, and we're in the final steps of getting it released. I have the manuscript up on my website as a free EPUB download, an ebook. And so anybody who's interested in it can go to my website now and get it for free if you don't want to wait for Amazon to put it up and pay for it later.
And people who are not in city government, but there are people on this call who are in student organizations, faculty organizations. This is a real good guide for them too, right?
Yeah, this book actually started when the Council of Student Governments at Victoria College asked me to come do a presentation to them on Robert's Rules of Procedure. How do we run a meeting? And it developed in me a real passion for helping organizations run their meetings in a way that is efficient. Because as city attorney, I have sat in an awful lot of city council meetings and other types of meetings, and not all of them are very efficient. It takes a long time to get work done. And the work is important. It needs to be done. We need to have the meetings, but we don't always need to have a 3-hour meeting. So I took together all of the lessons I learned over 20 years of representing local governments. It's not just about Robert's rules. It's about ways to streamline the process of preparing for the meeting, to streamline the information that you're sharing at the meeting so that decisions can be made easier and faster, and conversations can be maybe just a little bit shorter. and we can all get out of there and go home a little bit early.
It has been such a pleasure having you. And there's that beautiful logo developed by Thomas's son that he mentioned. Contact information for Thomas. Thomas is local. He's down on Navarro Street. There's phone numbers. The website is outstanding. I'll just punch up the website real quick, but you can learn more about him and the Gwosdz law firm. But this has been such a great conversation for our students, for our faculty, for our staff, community members. Thank you for this. And I know you have got a very busy schedule, and it's so nice to be able to get an hour with you. You're going to probably hear some follow-up. And I think there's a lot of students who are very excited about coming today and who probably feel really, really excited about the message that you gave them. Some of them, Thomas, for a class assignment, will be writing a reflection about the lessons that they've learned. And I would love to share some of those lessons with you, just so you can get a sense of what the audience took away from this as well, because the impact of this, Thomas, is tremendous. We record these, we put them on our YouTube channel. We have faculty and staff who then watch these recordings and use them as assignments. So no pressure, Thomas, but you're going into posterity. So I think it was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Any
Well, let me
last
thank
words?
you.
Yeah.
Yes, last words. I want to thank you for the invitation to be here. You talked at the beginning about how, we all have people we look up to, and I don't think you know how much I look up to what you do now and what you did when we were kids. Yeah, I may have helped coach some people in speech and debate, but you were actually in the ring, and I was always jealous of that when I was young. And you've done remarkable things. You've gone into higher education, which was at one point a career goal of mine. And you're reaching out to people and helping with the practical skills that are going to help them get ahead in life. These are all great things. And so if I can make you blush a little bit, I feel like I have done my job for the day. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come here. And if any of your students are interested in reaching out to me, they certainly let them do that through you. And I would be happy to have a cup of coffee with anybody who's interested in going to law school or learning more about local government and how it really works, and how it sometimes doesn't work.
Well, we hope to have you in our classes, not just our poli-sci and speech classes, but I know there's a number of faculty who would love to have you in their classes. So that might be the next thing. And I'm sure the Drs. Glenn would love to have you teaching here at some point, if you could ever work that into your very busy schedule. But thank you so much. We will be seeing Thomas Gwosdz again at some point. So look out for him when he comes to campus. You'll see the events, and thank all of you for joining us for Bridge to Brilliance. We're a little over time, but I think it was well worth it. I want to wish everybody well. Take care. God bless, and we'll see everybody soon.